Showing you the wrong document. Here we are. Okay, so I emailed the document to whoever gave me their email last week. You can have it in your inbox. If anybody else wants it, you can let me know and I'll resend it. But in any case, you should have it on your screen as well.
Rabbi, if you touch the 100% and make it a little larger.
Yes. Good?
Yes, Rabbi Citron?
Yes.
Yes, I did not get the documents. So after class, if you want, I can give you the, do you need it now? I can give you my email.
If you want it now, I could send it to you now, whatever you like. Or you can just follow, you know what, give it to me now. I'll take it now. What is it?
Okay, it's mpccomp_123@yahoo.com.
mpccomp_123@yahoo.com.
_123@yahoo.com. That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Now, sure. Okay, so what we're going to be learning about today is about going in Hashem's ways. There are two psukim that speak about that in this week's parsha. So the first one we have here is towards the beginning of the parsha. I think it's in Shlishi. As Hashem ha'amarta, you have designated Hashem today. Liyos l'chol elikim, to be for you, Hashem. V'laleches bedrochav, and to go in his ways. V'lishmer chukav v'mitzvosav v'mishpatav, and to guard his mitzvahs. He lists different types of mitzvahs. Chukim, mitzvahs, mishpatim. V'lishmoya b'koiloi, and to listen to his voice. So we'll mention what the Ramban says about this. That will have to do with the talk that we're going to discuss shortly. So I don't have the English for it, but the Ramban says, "V'laleches bedrachav." What does it mean to go in Hashem's ways? Shetasu hatoiv v'hayosher, that you should do that which is good and proper. V'tigmulu chesed ishes re'ehu, and that you should be kind to one another. So it's like a general idea of being kind. There's, of course, the mitzvahs, specific mitzvahs, like the pasuk says, to guard all the particular types of mitzvahs. But laleches bedrachav is a general idea of simply being kind and nice. Okay, we're going to skip the rest of the Ramban, and we'll go to the next pasuk, which is a little bit later on in the parsha. It's in the beginning of the brachos. This week's parsha, we have the brachos and the klalos, which, by the way, the Gemara says we always read parshas Ki Savai before Rosh Hashanah. Ki Savai contains the toichacha, the rebuke that Moshe Rabbeinu gives, and warns us if we do not listen to the Torah, we're going to receive punishments A, B, and C, and so on and so forth. 98 klalas to be specific. And the Gemara says that the message is that it's tichla shana v'kilaloseh, that the year and its curses should finish, and the new year and its blessings should begin. So we want to finish off all the curses before the new year begins. By the way, we also have the next parsha of Nitzavim, which is before the Rosh Hashanah, because Tosfos explains we don't want to go straight from the klalos into Rosh Hashanah, have a bad taste in our mouths, so the Chachamim made sure to have an extra parsha in between. But in any case, the pasuk says in the brachos, Yekimcha Hashem lo la'am kodesh. Hashem will establish you to be a holy nation. Ka'asher nishbalach, just like he promised you. Ki tishmaras mitzvahs Hashem alekecha, when you will guard the mitzvahs of Hashem, v'halachta bedrachav, and you will go in his ways. So the focus of the talk of the Rebbe that we're going to discuss today is about this particular mitzvah of v'halachta b'drachav, going in Hashem's ways. As we're going to see, the Rambam describes this as a general mitzvah of following Hashem's behaviors, different behaviors that Hashem has, that we should follow and do similar things. But before we get to that Rambam, I wanted to just quote the Hamik Dover, who's Rebbe Naftali Tzvi Berlin, who has an interesting take on this pasuk, even though it's not really related to what the Rambam says, but I found it interesting. So here's what it is. He's trying to explain what it means in the pasuk that Hashem will make you a holy nation, like He commanded you, when you will guard the mitzvahs and go in His ways. What is exactly this idea of holiness, guarding the mitzvahs, and going in His ways? These three things put together. So Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Berlin explains as follows. I'll read it in the Hebrew and I'll translate. V'yesh kama mitzvahs maisias. There are many action mitzvahs. She'i efshar la'asosim b'shas dveikos. You cannot do them when you are in a state of cleaving to Hashem. To be holy, usually we think of as feeling holy, feeling uplifted, feeling inspired, feeling like we're connected to Hashem. And that's in Hebrew called dveikus, a state of cleaving. Now, how is it possible for a person, or I should say, it's not always possible for a person to fulfill the action mitzvahs when he's in a state of dveikus? For example, you find a lost object. You have to work to, put up signs or spread the word on the WhatsApp chats or whatever to find the owner. Welcome, Isaac. So, and the same thing with, let's say, the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, which we're going to learn about in a minute that he mentions. So you have guests, you have to run around, maybe cleaning up the place to get it ready for them, maybe cooking, and when they come, entertaining them, serving them, taking care of them. You can't really do that if you're in a state of dveikus with Hashem, if you're like feeling so sublime and holy and emotionally attached to Hashem. You have to kind of come off that high and focus on the task at hand. I'll continue in the Hebrew of the Hamik Dover. How much more so when we talk about going in Hashem's ways, meaning to say in our physical lives, following Hashem's ways in the way we behave amongst people. So how can we be both holy and particular about the mitzvahs, which sometimes seems like a contradiction? Even if you want to talk about, mitzvahs that are between us and Hashem, you have to eat matzah. You have to eat a certain amount of matzah in a certain amount of time. And, there's like a focus on the physical performance of the mitzvah. And a person might wonder to himself, like, here I am chomping on this matzah, and I know the Morah is coming next, and then I got the koirach, I got all this business to do, a lot of eating stuff. And really the message of the matzah is so different than the eating of the matzah, a message of deliverance, a message of humility, a message of rebirth and regrowth and so on. And here I am stuck eating these wonderfully tasting crackers. So how do we reconcile the two? So the Hamek Dover says, "V'al ken yasiach das b'shas mikdusha." Don't worry, he says. While you're doing the mitzvah, you don't have to think about holiness. You can just think about the mitzvah. Mikol mokim yikimcha Hashem la'am kadosh. Hashem will make you holy. So listen to what he's saying. Yikimcha Hashem lo la'am kadosh kasher nishbalach. Hashem will make you holy like He promise to you, Ki sisharas mitzvahs Hashem alekecha, when you guard the mitzvahs. You have to keep the mitzvahs, even if you don't feel holy at that time. The holiness will come later. As a result of you doing the mitzvahs and you're going in Hashem's ways, He'll take care of the holiness. Umiyad achar ha'maisa, immediately after the action, tasig hakdusha v'hadvekas, you will achieve the holiness and the cleaving, like you had before. This is help from Hashem and a blessing. He gives an example of this, a famous example. Avram was in the middle of a prophetic experience right after he had the bris milah when he was 99 years old. The third day, the most painful day, he's sitting outside his tent. Hashem appears to him. So he's in a state of prophetic ecstasy. And then the guests come and he says, excuse me, Hashem, I need a few minutes to take care of these guests. He runs around, he gets water, he gets a cow, Sarah makes the bread, he serves them, the whole thing. He sees them off, he gets blessed by them, we know that too. And then he comes back to Hashem and Hashem continues conversing with him. So we see that he could not perform this mitzvah of having guests while he was in a state of prophetic ecstasy. He had to say to Hashem, wait, give me a few minutes. But after he did everything that he did, Hashem was, so to speak, waiting for him. He was able to go right back in to that state of cleaving to Hashem as before, even though he had been busy running around making food and serving it and all of that for all of that time. So that's a nice interpretation of this pshat, which is not connected to the rest of the shir, but I just liked it, so I shared it. I hope you forgive me. Okay. Here is a link to the Sicha. For those of you that would like to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe Sicha in its full Hebrew text, in number 5, you will find a link to the Sicha, the Likutei Sichas of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Some of them are posted online, some of them are not. I'm not sure which ones they decided why. But anyway, this volume is available online, so I posted that link if you want to see it yourselves later. Okay, so the Rambam describes this mitzvah of V'holachta b'drachav as behaving in the way that Hashem behaves. And of course, this is based on earlier teachings of Chazal, Midrashim, and Gemaras, as we're going to see. So let's read the Hebrew. It's from the Sefer HaMitzvahs, positive mitzvah number 8. Here's the Rambam. Hu shetzivanu lehidamois bo yis'ala kefi hayecholos. This mitzvah is to be similar to Hashem as much as possible. As the pasuk says, to go in Hashem's ways. That's in the pasuk we just had in number 3. This pasuk, the same pasuk, is found earlier in Devarim, where Hashem says to go in all of His ways. I think that's in Parshas Ekev, if I'm not mistaken. Uva beferush, and the Medrash explains, the Sifri explains, Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu nikra Chanon. Just like Hashem is called gracious, Af atah hayeh Chanon, you should be gracious. Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu nikra Racham, Hashem is called merciful, Af atah hayeh Racham, you too should be merciful. Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu nikra Chesed, Hashem is called pious, which means to go beyond the letter of the law. Af atah hayeh Chesed, you also should do the same. A similar pasuk is to go after Hashem, to walk after Hashem. That we should be similar to Hashem in His good actions and His exalted attributes. The descriptive attributes that we use for Hashem by way of example. When we say that Hashem is kind, Hashem is nice, Hashem is merciful, these are all for example, because Hashem's real description is beyond any comprehension we can have. We call him merciful because he acts in ways that human beings would call merciful. But that's not a true description of him. In any case, we should follow in his ways. All of these descriptive attributes that we use for describing Hashem, even though it's not a true description, it's just descriptive of the way he behaves towards us, we should behave in similar ways. I want to skip ahead to number 9, where the Gemara in Sicha gives several examples of the ways of Hashem. And this pasuk, the one that he uses, is the one that he just quoted in the end of the Rambam, Achrei Hashem Elokechem telechu, go after Hashem. I'm not going to read the Gemara word for word, but you have it in front of you if you want to follow. The Gemara says, V'chi efsher leilech acharei hashchina. Is it possible to walk after the Shechina? It says about Hashem, Ki Hashem Elokecha eish oichlahu. Hashem is like a flaming fire. You cannot get close to a fire. So what does it mean to walk in the ways of Hashem, or to walk after Hashem? So the Gemara says you should follow Hashem's midos. Here are several examples. Let's make a thing out of it. No, it's not working. Why is it not working? There we are. Okay, just as Hashem clothes the naked, so too you should clothe the naked. When did Hashem clothe the naked?
Adam and Chava.
Adam and Chava after the sin, exactly. They felt naked because they understood the difference between good and bad and so on. And Hashem made for them kosnos or, leather clothing. Just like Hashem visits the sick, you should do the same. When did that happen? Avram Avinu, exactly what we just mentioned. Just like Hashem consoles the mourners, you should do the same. When was that? Isaac, you should know that. It has to do with your name.
And Hashem was, with Moshe with Aaron for his 2 sons, no?
Yitzchok. After Avram passed away, Hashem appeared to Yitzchok.
Right.
And it doesn't say exactly what he said to him. So Chazal say he didn't really have to say anything. He just appeared to be Menachem Avelim. So just like Hashem buried the dead, we should do the same. When is that?
That was Moshe Rabbeinu.
That was Moshe Rabbeinu, exactly. Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. Nobody knew where he was. So obviously nobody was able to bury him. Hashem himself buried Moshe Rabbeinu. So this is how the Gemara explains Achrei Hashem Elokechem telechu. Follow in Hashem's ways in all of these matters. Do as Hashem did, and that's how we follow in Hashem's ways. In addition, the Rebbe says we have the idea of all of the mitzvahs being called Hashem's ways, not just those specific mitzvahs that we see that Hashem did in the pasuk, but in fact, all of the mitzvahs are called Hashem's ways. And in several of the psukim, we see that when it talks about going Hashem's ways, it talks about the mitzvahs. Go back to number 1. Laleches b'drachav v'lishmer chukav mitzvaysav, to go in his ways and guard his mitzvahs. And number 3, Tishmas mitzvahs Hashem Elokecha v'alachta b'drachav, you guard the mitzvahs and go in his ways. So going in his ways has to do with simply doing the mitzvahs. It's not only about that, but it has to do with that. Why are the mitzvahs called Hashem's ways? So the idea is that Hashem fulfills the mitzvahs. It says in the Medrash Magi devorov liYaakov chukav mishpatav liYisrael. He tells his words to Yaakov, his mitzvahs, and his rules to the Jewish people. And what that means is that they're his own mitzvahs and his own rules. Hashem tells us to do what he himself does. This is a famous Maimer Chazal in Lubavitch because it's part of the bar mitzvah Maimer that every bar mitzvah child is expected to learn, or learn by heart if possible, and recite at his bar mitzvah. So kids kind of learn it at that age. So it's a famous Maimer Chazal in Lubavitch, but it's in fact expounded upon in the Gemara. The Gemara in Brachas 6a says that Hashem puts on tefillin. And the Gemara goes on to even discuss exactly what psukim it says in Hashem's tefillin. So we have 4 parshias in our tefillin. And Hashem, so to speak, also has 4 parshias, 4 sections in his tefillin. And in those sections, whatever it means that he has sections, it says various verses about his, so to speak, devotion to us. Our tefillin talk about our devotion to Hashem. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. We believe in one Hashem. V'hoyem Shemoya. We should do the mitzvahs. And his tefillin speak about his devotion to us, so to speak. And he goes ahead in the Gemara there and he spells out what it says in all of the 4. We're not going to read them inside, but that's just one example of how we see that the ways of Hashem are the mitzvahs because he does them. And now we have another example also in the Gemara Brachas on the very next page, 7a, where we see that Hashem davens. I'm going to read this Gemara along the same lines. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yossi, how do we know that Hashem davens? Like the pasuk says, "V'avayosim el har kodshi." We're going to say it in Slichas and Mirz Hashem on Motzei Shabbos. V'avayosim el har kodshi, I will bring them to my holy mountain. V'simachtim beveis tfilasi. I will make them happy in my house of prayer. It doesn't say beveis tfilasam, in their house of prayer. It says beveis tfilasi, in my house of prayer. What does it mean? It means that Hashem davens there. And the Gemara goes on to actually say what Hashem davens. Rav Zutra Batuvia says, Hashem says, may it be my will that my mercy will overcome my anger towards the Jewish people for their transgressions. May my mercy prevail over my other attributes through which Israel is punished. I conduct myself towards my children Israel with the attribute of mercy, and I enter before them beyond the letter of the law. So
Rabbi Citron,
yes,
the verse before translates it different from what you said, where it starts out the house of my prayer. If you go up 1 line or 2 lines, so there it says it does not say the house of their. Okay, it says make them joyful in the house of my prayer. So it's a little different than the way you said it. You see where it says joyful in the house of my prayer.
Right.
So I thought you were saying the my house of prayer.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. It's not my house of prayer. It's the house of my prayer. That's important. Exactly. It's the house of my prayer. Beveis tfilasi, the house of my prayer. Correct. That's important. My house of prayer would not be approved. It's the house of my prayer that Hashem himself davens in the Beis HaMikdash. Why does Hashem have to daven? Why doesn't he just do whatever he's davening for? That's a question that we're not going to address in this class, nor does the Rebbe talk about it in this Sicha, in this talk of his. But the point is that we see that Hashem does that mitzvah of davening just like we. So when it says to go in the path of Hashem, it's referring to the behaviors that Hashem does, and more generally, the mitzvahs in general. So the question was asked to the son of the Rambam. The Rambam had a son whose name was Rebbe Avram ben Harambam. He's not as famous as his father, the Rambam, but he was quite a learned person. He wrote responsa. He also wrote commentary on the stories of the Gemara. And he's not, people say that he's underappreciated because he's kind of like a secondary to the Rambam. Some suggest that if he would have been not related, he would be more famous, but he's kind of overshadowed by his father. But, I don't know if that's true. It's not for us to decide. But the fact is that he answered a lot of questions about his father's teachings. So the question was posed to him, why do we count this mitzvah of going in Hashem's ways as one of the 613 mitzvahs? The Rambam gives rules for when we count something as a mitzvah and when we don't. And according to the Rambam's rules, in order to be counted as a mitzvah, it cannot be a general mitzvah. It has to be a specific mitzvah. If it's general, it's not counted. Like it's customary in Chabad that on a birthday, a person should take on a hachlata toiva, a good resolution. So, at my kids' birthdays, we say, okay, so what's your resolution? So sometimes they say, I'm going to be a good boy. I'm going to listen. We only have boys besides my girl who's already 21. So I'm going to be a good boy. I'm going to listen. I'm going to learn Torah. I'm going to do mitzvahs. None of those are accepted as a proper hachlat, as a proper resolution, because they're too general, even though, of course, we have to do all of that. But if it's not a specific resolution to do a specific thing at a specific time for a specific time and so on, then it kind of peters out. So, of course, we have general mitzvahs in the Torah, but for it to count as a specific mitzvah, it has to involve a specific action. So they asked Rabbi Avram ben Harambam, why does the Rambam count the halachta b'drachav as one of the 613 mitzvahs, which he does? We just quoted him. He counts it as mitzvah number 8, positive mitzvah number 8. Why does he count it if it seems like a general mitzvah? Because if you look in the pasuk says you should go in my ways in the context of fulfilling the mitzvahs. So it sounds like it's just an extra encouraging word that Moshe Rabbeinu is giving us, or Hashem is giving us, extra encouragement towards fulfilling mitzvahs in general, without a specific action that should result from those words. So Rabbi Avram ben Harambam gives us the rule for how to interpret psukim. His rule is we have to understand that the way to interpret psukim is based on the traditions of the sages. We cannot just take a pasuk as if it's in a vacuum and say, well, it seems to me this pasuk means that, or something else, or whatever it might be. The way that we interpret the psukim has to be in line with the traditions of our sages. And our sages understood this pasuk, says Rabbi Avram ben Harambam, to be referring not just to mitzvahs in general, but to be referring to certain actions that we have to do in order to be similar to Hashem. Like we mentioned before, to visit the sick, to bury the dead, to clothe the naked, to comfort the mourners, and so on. And he says this is also something that can be understood from the pasuk, because the pasuk says "V'halachta b'drachav," to go in Hashem's ways, in addition to guarding all the mitzvahs. If it's just telling us to guard the mitzvahs, it wouldn't have to repeat itself. It would just tell us to guard the mitzvahs. So it should be understood as adding something to the mitzvahs in general, which is to follow in the ways that Hashem goes, as we said earlier. Okay, I've been talking for some time, so maybe we should take questions. Only if you have questions, of course.
Rabbi?
Yes.
What does the word sukkim mean?
Psukim are verses.
Thank you.
Sure. Pasuk is the singular. Psukim is the plural. Anybody else?
Can you give an example of specific promise or specific mitzvah besides the, one that is we are following the God's example? What would be considered the right way to present it? If the boy is saying, I'm going to be a good boy, I'm going to study Torah, does it have to be specifics? Let's see, I will not disobey parents, or I would help with some chores at home, or how it should be specified.
Yes, this is what we like to hear. Specific mitzvahs, like the most recent birthday that we had. My son said he's going to daven mincha. Well, that's a very nice idea, because it's a specific thing. You could do it every day at a certain time. You could start it, you could finish it, and you did it. If it's a general thing, I'm going to listen. I mean, do we listen all the time? It's very hard to listen all the time. But, if it comes to talking respectfully, I'm going to talk respectfully to my parents. That's wonderful. But it should be specific.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so the Rebbe tries to understand this interpretation.
One more question, Rabbi?
Yes, please.
So if a person's making a achlata, it's not that I'm going to do this and this mitzvah for a month or a week. It's an achlata for the year?
No, actually, the Rebbe said, if I'm not mistaken, at least this is what I was told when I was younger and we were making hachlatas at Farbrengens. The Rebbe said that you should take a hachlata for a limited time, and then hopefully you can renew it after that time. Because if you take it for a very long period of time, maybe you won't be able to handle it. So take it for 30 days. If I'm not mistaken, that was the general, suggestion, to take a good resolution for 30 days. And then hopefully you'll do it and you'll be able to renew it after that time. And if you see that it's too much for you, then you won't. Somebody asked me this morning about a hachlata that they took and they did not manage to keep it today. They wanted to know my advice of what they should do to make up for it. He said he made a hachlata. Hachlata is a resolution. Yes, Susan, what was your question?
You just answered a resolution. I didn't know.
Resolution. Okay, perfect. So he made a resolution that he was going to come every morning to Shacharis 1 hour beforehand. And he slept late because he went to sleep late, and he did not come 1 hour beforehand. Came on time to daven, but he didn't.
Rabbi, there's a lot of background noise.
I think it's somebody else. If everybody could please mute yourselves.
I don't know if everybody knows how.
So I think I figured out last time how to do it.
The mute button on the bottom pops up to mute all.
The mute button on the bottom pops up to mute.
Or the vocal, the one that has the voices. There's a little arrow.
Where are my kids when I need them?
Yeah. Or the 3 dots on the right.
Da, 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 da.
So your resolution for today is to learn how to mute on the Zoom, huh?
The thing is, I learned it last week and I don't remember it. I have to.
Only Andrea Lieberman is not muted.
We have to just mute, not talk.
Okay, Andrea
Okay.
muted herself. We're fine
Very
now.
good. Excellent. We're good. Okay, so anyway, that was his resolution, and he came late to shul, and not late, he missed his hour. So he asked me how he could make up for it. Should he come 2 hours early next time? Or what should he do to make up for it? What do you think?
You can't make up for it. How can he make up for it? He already lost the time.
You can do 2 minchas.
So here's the thing. In terms of making up the time to learn Torah, he could make up the time. He'd take an hour off of something else he would do and learn Torah. But the point of coming early to shul is not just about learning Torah, because you can learn Torah at home too. The point is, when you come early, you can settle down, you can be in the right frame of mind, you don't come rushing in off the street and go straight to talk to Hashem. You're more settled. So the way to make up for it, in my opinion, would be to come an hour before Mincha one day, or an hour before Ma'ariv, whatever other davening that he doesn't usually come early for, to make up for it at that time. So that way he'll be, in the right frame of mind for that prayer. Anyway, back to what we are discussing here. So the Rebbe has a question on this explanation of the Rambam, because even though the Rambam does explain that the going in Hashem's ways is not just about doing mitzvahs in general, it's about doing specific mitzvahs, which are burying the dead, all the things that we mentioned. The question is that those mitzvahs are already included elsewhere, because the pasuk says, "V'ahavta l're'acha kamoicha," you shall love your fellow as yourself. That is a pasuk, a verse in the Torah portion of Kedoshim, the 19th chapter of Vayikra, the book of Vayikra. And if you love your fellow as yourself, you will definitely do all those things. If he's naked, you'll clothe him. If he's sick, you'll visit him. All those things. So back to the question, why do we have to be told to go in Hashem's ways if we are supposed to love our fellow Jew as ourselves anyway, which includes all of those things? So some want to say that one is a mitzvah of action and one is the mitzvah of emotion. There's the mitzvah of behaving in those ways that we said. You should actually help the person in all of those ways. And then there's the idea behind it. And that is, when you're doing it, you should have in mind, I am doing this because I want to emulate my Creator. This is what Hashem would do, and this is what I want to do. So they even explain that this has to do with the 2 verses from which we learn this concept. There is the verse of going in Hashem's ways, and there is a verse about cleaving to Hashem. Going in the ways is referring to the action, acting the way Hashem acts. Cleaving is referring to the fact that as we do these things, we should bear in mind that we are doing them for the sake of cleaving to Hashem and becoming similar to Hashem. So the Rebbe takes that one step further and explains that, in fact, the intention that we have should actually affect our actions. Sometimes we can do an action and we can have an intention. And the two things are, separate. But in this case, the way we help other people is different if we are doing it because we want to be similar to Hashem. So if we are helping somebody else because of the idea of loving your fellow as yourself. So we have feelings, we have emotional feelings towards other people, and therefore we're helping them. We actually may not be helping them in the proper way. We have to sometimes help people without being too emotional. It's good to be emotional because if you feel the other person's pain, you'll be moved to help them. And if you're just doing it for the mitzvah and you don't really care about them, well, then if you have an excuse, you'll pass on the mitzvah to somebody else. So it's important to feel the emotion. But when it comes to actually doing the mitzvah, it's also important to remove the emotion a little bit and think about the matter intellectually. Think about how you can help the person in the most effective way. Because if you're emotional, you might help them in a way that might not be beneficial to them. Not every time you help somebody, or you think you're helping them, are you actually helping them? If you give money to somebody who is a drug addict or is an alcoholic, so you're not helping them, you're harming them. In fact, even if you give money to a person who is not working, but could be working, and the fact that you're supporting them, why should they have to work? They're having a good life. So you're not helping them. You are, in fact, preventing them from being constructive, from leading a constructive life. So you might feel the need to help. It makes you feel good, but it may not be what's best for them. If we are doing it in the manner that we care, that we want to be similar to Hashem, well, the way Hashem does things is always in a measured manner. Hashem blesses us. Hashem gives us plenty of blessings, but he also gives us a few patch here and there. He gives us reminders that we have to follow his ways. He gives us reminders that we have to think about him. He gives us up days. He gives us down days. And all of those experiences help us develop as human beings and as spiritually elevated beings. So Hashem has chesed, he has kindness, but he also has gevurah, he has strength. And there's always a blend of the two when it comes to the way he deals with us. And this has to do with the famous golden rule of the Rambam. We're not going to read it inside. It's quite a lengthy one. It's number 11, but it's Laws of Deos 1. In the first chapter of the Rambam, Laws of Deos, he has a lengthy explanation about the golden rule. The golden rule of the Rambam is always to take the middle path, not to be too extreme in any manner, not to be too giving, not to be too stingy, not to be too, abstinent from physical pleasures, not to indulge too much in physical pleasures. And he goes on and gives many, many examples of this. But at the end of all of these examples, if you go down to the very end, he says, we are commanded to walk in these intermediate paths, and they are good and straight paths, as it says, and you shall walk in his ways. So walking in his ways, according to the Rambam, includes the idea of going in the intermediate path, of not going to one extreme or the other. So this helps us understand why the halachta b'drach of going in Hashem's ways is counted as a mitzvah. Because A, it is about a certain action, the action that we mentioned about helping people. But at the same time, it's not enough to just help people out of a love for them, which is already included in Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, because that could become too emotional. And instead of that, we have to help people in a way that is best for them. To do that, we have to take a step back, think about it, and behave in a way that is going to be most effective in assisting them. And that's the middle path, not too much of any one thing at any one time. So this is why it's counted as a mitzvah, and it's an individual mitzvah, because it actually tells us how to behave, how to do the mitzvahs that have to do with helping our fellow Jew in a way that is similar to Hashem, in a measured manner and in the manner that is most effective towards helping people. Okay, I did a lot of talking. Any questions?
Where these the pages that you are showing us, where are they?
So I made it into a Google document and I shared it on the chat. If you go to the chat of this class, click on chat and you should see a link to that document. If you click on the link, it'll come up on your screen.
I don't see any link.
I'll post it one more time.
Please.
Okay, it should come up just now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, I wish you all a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rebbe.
My pleasure. We'll meet again next week, God willing, only a few days before Rosh Hashanah.
Have a great...
Don't see it on the chat, Rabbi.
I just posted it.
Yeah, I just came on mine. Rabbi, can you give us a 1 or 2 minute takeaway?
Okay.
Yes. So the 1 minute takeaway is, when the pasuk says to go in Hashem's paths, it means not just to do the mitzvahs in general, but to do specific things that Hashem does towards us. And the Gemara gives many examples of how to treat other people the way Hashem treated them, to visit them and care for them and so on. But what this pasuk is adding is that when we care for people, we have to do it in the way Hashem does it, which is in a way that is most effective towards helping people. We have to be careful to not get too emotional about helping people, because then we might help in a way that makes us feel good, but perhaps does not actually help the person effectively.
Rabbi?
Yes.
The Rambam, didn't he say, Maimonides, didn't he say, do not do unto others what you expect others not to do unto you? Now, I believe in that, but I also
believe, I'm sure the Rambam said it too.
I believe in both. I personally myself, I believe in both rules. The opposite also. But I mean, did he also include that? Was that also part of, to do unto others what you expect others to do unto you? I mean, is it also the same thing? I mean, I don't know.
It's the same.
Reciprocally, it means the same. Yes, I understand.
It was actually Hillel who coined that phrase. That what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. But it's the same. Why he expressed it in the negative, not the positive, I'm not sure, but it's the same idea.
Okay.
Okay, have a good Shabbos, everybody. A good day and a good
Can
Shabbos.
I ask, I didn't write down what God did for Isaac.
He comforted him after Avram passed away.
Comfort. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everybody.
Amen.